Okay, it's a lovely day here in Boulder, and I'm gonna do some shoe testing. Today I'm gonna do some Lore versus Bont shoes. So gonna go get warmed up in my Lores, the Watts, look at those bad boys. And then I'm gonna do a 1 minute effort ripping up a hill pretty good. And then I'm gonna come home and put these on, my custom modified with Gorilla Tape on the toes Bonts. And then I'm going to switch back and forth a few times and do a total of 3 efforts in each shoe. So 6 efforts in completion, 3 efforts in the Bonts, and 3 efforts in the Lores. And I'm going to switch in between every effort and just look at the data and see if it teases anything out. Got Wahoo power pedals on, got my Roam 3 on the bars here. So that's all paired and ready to rock. And we'll see what happens. Stay tuned for some tasting of blood. Okay, so that was the second effort, the first one in the Bonts, which admittedly I have not been riding this pair of Bonts very much recently, although I do ride this same shoe on my mountain bike pretty regularly, so it's not completely alien to me at this point. And these look pretty ghetto because I cut out the toe to make extra room, because Bont makes a nice shoe, but their toe is not as straight as I want it to be. So they look real good. There's that. But this day isn't about looks, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this video. Haha. But now I'm gonna do another lap of the Lore, although I might need to extend my recovery window a little bit because I've made a crucial error in my calculations, which was that I forgot that at 3:30 is pickup on Thursdays, which means our entire street becomes annihilated with moms and dads and wee ones, as they say in some other country. And so I'm gonna maybe make a little jumbo recovery loop, because if I go ripping up my street, or the street rather, when pickup's happening, that could be bad. There's like kids and doors and dogs and scooters and all the things. So, we'll see how it goes, but so far, I feel like things are going pretty well. Consistently been able to do these efforts, which I was a little concerned with, because it's not like I do this type of training that much these days. I'm not like a track guy anymore. Like, this stuff was pretty common when I was trying to, win world championships on the track, but they don't care about 53-year-olds racing track world. Well, I guess they do if you race masters. This, by the way, is the magical device that is absolutely essential to get your Lore shoes on. If you get the Watts, which is the high top version, and you try to get them on without a shoehorn, you can do it, but it's just like putting on a really, really aggressive alpine ski boot. It takes you about 45 seconds of wriggling to get your foot in there, which is a long time when you're trying to get out the door for a bike ride. But the shoehorn lets you slide that heel right in. It really is a game changer. So, highly recommended. This one's metal. I think my wife found it for me on the Basatron 6000. Anyway, that's what you get. So I'm gonna go ride around the neighborhood a couple times and kill some time while everybody gets picked up. And then I'll try the next effort. A little warm up, a little test round, and then the first actual effort. Oh, raptors are speaking to us. Now I'm gonna change to the Bont and go do my first lap in this shoe, if I can get my foot in it. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That's pretty cool. Oh, man. Putting these on back to back, the differences are immediate. Don't worry, I'm not gonna go lefty righty. I'm gonna put both shoes on. Maybe we'll try a left right down the road, just to get crazy with it. I'm not really looking at power during these efforts. I'm just going. right? Sorry, bad camera angle there. Bad camera operator. Oh, and now you get blasted by the sun. Look at that. Look how radiant I am. So, yeah, I'm not looking at metrics or trying to game metrics at all. I'm just going up this hill. And this is, you'll see the profile when we do the analysis of the power, but it's a very smooth street. There's no wind today at all, like 0. And barely a cloud in the sky. It's pretty stunning. A little frightening for February. And I just am lighting it up from this crosswalk to the top of the hill every lap. And I thought it was going to take me about a minute, but actually this time I made it quicker than a minute. So now we'll see what happens at the Bonts, and I'll do a couple laps back and forth, and then we'll crunch numbers. Okay. That was round 2. So I went lower Bont. That was Bont of the second round, and now we're going to do the final 2 efforts. The first one with the lower, and the last effort of the day will be with the Bont. And I'll say I have some observations about the subjective characteristics of the shoes going back to back. I tell people all the time in my fit studio, when they ask me what shoe should I buy, the answer is the one that fits you the best. And I don't know which brand that is because your foot is not my foot. But the best way for you to figure that out is to try on as many shoes as possible. Ideally back to back in the same session. So you go to the shoe store and you say, hello, my name is Slim Shady, and I'd like you to give me every shoe you have in a size 43, and then leave me alone for 45 minutes. And you get all the shoes and you take out the factory insole, or it's really a liner, would be a better term for that. And then you put in whatever you're using in your current shoe, assuming that it'll fit in there properly. And sometimes it doesn't, so you have to know when that's the case. Like, for example, the heel may not fit in the heel cup very well of some shoes, even though it fits in yours, etc. But those details aside, you do your best to try them all on back to back. And then the differences become really clear. It's like shopping for white paint, right? Or gray paint. You go to the store and you look at a bunch of gray paints and they all look very similar. But if you stare at them for 60 seconds or 90 seconds, then suddenly the nuance comes out. The purple comes out, the blue comes out, the undertones come out, right? And this is what you're trying to do in a cycling shoe. You're trying to figure out how well the heel cup fits you, where the boas are hitting you, whether the tongue is a wrap design like this, it wraps over the foot, or whether it's a more conventional 2-sided shoe with a centralized tongue. Those have a different impact on how they fit the foot. For me, a wrap tongue is definitely better. For some people, a centralized tongue is better. So depends on, who you are and what your foot is like and some of the details of your anatomy. So got the lures on, off for the last round. Stay tuned. Okay, 5 out of 6 efforts done. Gonna change into the Bont for the last rep. And then I will come in and eat a little snack. And then I will sit down and look and see if there's anything to be teased out in the numbers. I have been looking a little bit at the lap averages at the top of the hill, and I'm seeing a few trends, but I'm not gonna spoil the surprise. And also, that was just me looking at the top of the hill when I was pretty much crushed out of my brain, trying to make these efforts be good. I'm really not trying to pace these at all, except to be consistent. So I'm starting them at the same crosswalk, and I'm standing up out of the saddle. My approach speed has been quite similar. We can look and see in the files, but pretty damn close every time. And I stand up to a particular car that's parked, or really it's someone's driveway. And then I sit And then I stand at the end when my cadence starts to bog a bit, because the grade is like, I don't know, it's probably 2%, and then it kind of just slowly ramps up like this. At the top, it's probably 6 or something. I don't know. So it's a nice little ramp to infinity. That's what we got. So legs are starting to feel pretty shaky, which is to be expected after 5 efforts of about almost a minute long that are pretty flat out. That's pretty normal, but this is the kind of training I would do on the track all the time. We do flying 500-meter time trials, and we would wind it up so the effort would end up being probably in the neighborhood of 45 or 55 seconds, depending. And so my legs remember this stuff. Yeah, except there wasn't a hill at the end. But the hill makes it easier in a way, because when you start to bog, you can just stand and really push. So in a way, it makes it less about drive and more about just maintaining speed. You're trying to keep your speed where it is, rather than let your speed, in a 500-meter time trial, you're trying to prevent your speed from falling. In some ways, maybe that's harder. I don't know. Now I'm just stalling, so I don't have to do this last effort, but I gotta go do it. Okay, so let's take a look at these files in Training Peaks, the old Training Peaks. I'm gonna get my kit on because I got the sauna on, and I'm gonna go jump on the sauna straight after I do this video. So chamois time is training time. Here I made some notes on the order. I did the first lap was the lower warm-up, and then it went lower bont, lower bont, lower bont, lower bont. Maybe I said that too many times. There's a whole bunch of medals in this file, but these don't mean anything because I've really been not training with power or heart rate for the last 2 months. I've just been riding a gravel bike, my Mosaic gravel bike, with no sensors on it. And that's been nice. So all these low power records don't mean diddly. But even if there was counting all year, they wouldn't mean diddly for the record. But here's some funny metrics on this file. So for an hour, 40 minutes, normalized was 230 and average was 126. That's actually probably got to be a record. And then my VI was 1.83. That's your variability index. So that's insane. That's what you get when you ride super, super, super easy on recovery, and then you just rip yourself to smithereens on a hill. You get this ridiculous file, and you stop in between to change shoes. You get these obnoxious metrics. Like, no, you'll never see this anywhere else. The difference between this normalized and this average is like about as extreme as you could get. It's like 2x. And the VI of almost 2, I've never seen a VI that high in a real file, like meaning like an actual bike ride or some sort of race. Like maybe a VI of that high would be something like, there's a few crits that could be like this. There was a criterium that I did in downtown Manhattan once that looked like a dog bone, and we went back and forth across the middle, and then it had little loops on either end, but the loops were ridiculously tiny and technical. So you basically rode through someone's living room on either end, through some trading lobby or some shit, and then you just went ripping down this like 600-meter long dead flat straight. So that would be an example of a race that would probably have a ridiculously high VI because it was really stop-go, right? Cyclocross races would have a very high VI. I don't know, maybe there's cross races that have this VI, probably. But pretty funny metrics. Also 118 with a max of 163 heart rate, that's pretty funny. And my minimum cadence was 1. So there you go. But onward to the details. So here was my warm-up lap, which was 50 seconds. And I thought it was going to be a little longer than that. I was shooting for more like a minute. And so I added some time into the subsequent laps. But that counts as our warm-up. So average was 449, max was 635. And like I said, I basically just stood up and ripped it for about the first 30 seconds or so. Let's see where the file is here. Let's look at this. I don't know why. This is one thing about Training Peaks I've never really understood, is why in the world they can't make this graph right here the size of your whole screen. There's no way to do that I've ever found. You can't actually make this any bigger. You can just move stuff around. Not helpful. So there's our warm-up effort, so to speak. And you can see I front-loaded it like crazy. I just hit the button, ripped it. There I was even a second or two delay. And then I just went gonzo, and then here at the end, you can see this yellow line's my speed. There's heart rate goes up and then, comes up pretty quickly and then kind of starts to plateau, still rising. And in the end right here, power kicks up. I'm starting to kind of fall off the cliff a little bit here. So I sit about here, and this is seated, and then I stand again for the last part. And I kept that same pattern throughout each of the efforts. So they're going to kind of have this U-shaped curve to them with a front load on the beginning. And I did that to intentionally exhaust myself and just pace these like an idiot and just rip it up the hill to go as fast as I could without much thought for pacing. So, and a comment on these averages, like 4:49 for 50 seconds. For some people, that'll be like mind-blowingly high, and for other people's, that'll be like, you suck. Yeah, duh. That's bike racing. For context, I'm 53 years old. I live at altitude. I don't do a lot of this type of training right now. And so the numbers are what they are, but that doesn't really matter. Like, what's more relevant is, how hard was I going? This is an IF of 1.74 in theory over my threshold, which I don't even know what it's set at in Training Peaks right now. That's how much I pay attention to this stuff at the moment. It's probably set at like 265, which is close enough to where my threshold is in the summer because I go riding up at 10,000 feet all the time. And if you put it too high, I never watch that stuff anyway. So who cares? Threshold is a unicorn number anyway. But I went really friggin' hard. That's what we can say here relative to my threshold. I don't know if a lot of people can do that regularly. Anyway, I ramble. I digress. So here's our first proper lore effort, the one that supposedly counted. And we'll zoom into that. And we can see that same basic curve, front loaded to there, seated probably somewhere in here, and then lifted at the end a bit. This one's a bit smoother than the other one was. And I hit the button and then I stood up and ripped it. It's interesting that there's this much delay. I was seated when I hit the button and then I stood up right away. Maybe I just needed to hit the button earlier. Anyway, that was 53 seconds. And by the way, here's an interesting quirk of Training Peaks. If any of you Training Peaks people are listening, you can hear this gripe. Literally your own definition of normalized power says that under 8 minutes normalized power doesn't mean anything. So why is it that when I get a 53-second interval in here, it even lists normalized power? That should not be a thing because it just confuses people. So in this instance, normalized power should be disregarded, although it was only 1 watt difference than my normal power, my average power rather. But it shouldn't be displayed, for the record. But why display metrics when we know they're not accurate? This is by your own definition. Average grade was 4%. And let's see. Yeah, we don't have a way to tell. You can see the grade kind of getting steeper towards the end a little bit, although this graph doesn't do it much justice. So 484 by 94 RPM. That's what we care about. That was our lore. Now let's go to our first Bont effort. Similar curve, a couple seconds delay, big rip, seated in here, lift to the end. You can see I was struggling to lift at the end there. And generalized fatigue will probably be a thing on these. Very similar numbers, 481 to 92. So pretty similar to the first, 484 to 94, 481. I mean, that's within the range of error. Speed 32.2. 34, that's interesting. The speed was actually significantly higher on these. And the time was 53 seconds and the time was 56 seconds. So that's interesting. There was really no wind today, dead calm. So it shouldn't have been like I got hit with a headwind. 492, got a little bit better for this one by 94 RPM, 33 Ks. And 474. So now we're starting to tease out some difference with the Bont lagging a bit and also having a slower time there. And let's look again. Lore 3, 496. Interestingly, that was my best effort, 55 seconds. That's interesting. And 464, the worst effort for the Bont was the last one. So this is interesting. I mean, we look at the trends of the data, and in each consecutive 1-2 pairing, the Bont was worse. Or you might say they were tied in this first one from there to there. That's close enough to where we call it a tie, in my opinion. 484 to 481, that's well within the range of any power meter. And range of error. And the pace was similar, although the speed was higher, which is interesting. I wonder if I hit the buttons in exactly the same places. Maybe not. I tried to hit the buttons in the same places, but at the top of the climb, I was taking a right onto this street, and I was pretty cross-eyed, so there was probably some inaccuracy in those button hits, just the way it was. And I could probably try to pick it out of the GPS, but it's probably not accurate to be worthwhile doing. Now, so there's our second lower effort was 492, and the Bont was 474. So here's what's interesting about the Bont trend, thinking about this data out loud. And, we'll put this through the ANOVA later. That was a bad joke. But if we look at the three Bont trends, right, we have 481, 474, and 464. So losing about 10 watts in between each one, not quite 10 in between 1 and 2. If we look at the lowers, not including the warm-up, we get 484, 492, and 496. So that's interesting to consider the data in that context. I got better every time I used the lowers. I got worse every time I used the Bonts in every consecutive effort. That's really interesting. I'm looking at this data for the first time, and I'm just thinking out loud as I say this. So, that's actually quite fascinating. And I think that probably this is indicative of how people think about data, right? Let's make this bigger. Maybe not that bigger. Small, medium. Whoa, there. I think this is how people commonly think of data or performance gains, right? They ride one shoe, they ride a Bont, they ride a lure, they put on a new saddle, they do a new interval set. And they're thinking, I'm going to increase my power over a given duration, right? Whatever that may be. I'm going to make my 5-minute power higher or my 20-minute power higher. And that's certainly possible. But in this case, what we're seeing is not only better resilience from set to set, but we're actually seeing repeatability that has an upward trend, meaning my nervous system is responding more effectively to repeated efforts. So that, I think, is probably exceptional. I wouldn't have expected a result like that. And that makes me want to do another round of this for sure to see if I can replicate those results. Or not see if I can replicate them, but to get results and see if the results are replicated or have a similar trend. Because that suggests to me that the way the shoe is capturing power, it's encouraging muscles to turn on. It's encouraging neural system activation, right? Or nervous system activation of muscle fibers and load sharing. And that suggests that, it's really a synergistic effect that we're getting from the shoe. But maybe I'm reaching on that. I don't know. This is obviously in a really small data set, and this is like, whatever, bro science, gym science, basement science. So take it for what it is, obviously. But I think it's quite interesting that we see these trends where on every consecutive rep, I got worse or lower output with the Bont, and on every consecutive rep of the same set, my output with the lures increased. I would expect that. I've often said that improvements in bike fit or equipment can result in a more subtle increase in performance, which is represented by better durability over the stretch of a race or an event. So maybe your 20-minute power doesn't go up. Maybe your 5-minute power doesn't go up. Your absolute ceiling of output at those durations. However, it could be that you might be able to perform repeated bouts of your highest intensity for longer durations, or you might have more ability to repeat that intensity. Better repeatability, that's what I'm trying to say, over the duration of your event. And that is quite useful. In this case, we went a step beyond that, or the data suggests that these shoes gave me a step beyond that, which was not only that my efforts were more repeatable with the lures, but they actually got better. My best effort of the day was the last one. That's interesting. So I definitely like to try a few more sessions with these, and perhaps probably the next logical step for me would be to swap the order. So next time I'll do the first set with the Bonts, and then I will switch to the lures, and that way I finish on the lures. No, I finish on the Bonts rather, to make them so that the last rep, if I'm, this could be a last rep effect is what is occurring to me as I'm thinking out loud about this. Meaning you kind of get to the last rep and it's like, all right, I'm done with the workout. I can push through and dig a little bit deeper because I know that there's nothing after this. This is the way the human psyche works. Even if we try to avoid this, there's a teleological effect to the completion of a workout. And I see this a lot when I analyze power data from my athletes, right? They'll do a set of efforts similar to what I'm doing today. Maybe they're 45 seconds or 30 seconds long, maybe they're a minute long. And sometimes when the athlete's motivated, they get to the end of the set and they're kind of fired up and they can push and lift for the last rep. And it could be that effect is what happened today with me. It was like, all right, last one, I can let her fully fly. Because I had a little bit of trepidation about doing these efforts, honestly. This isn't the type of training that I'm doing real commonly right now. I'm doing more, other stuff, not these types of efforts. I don't sit around and do intervals. So I wasn't quite sure how my body would respond. So it could be that when I got to the final rep, there was a sense of a little bit of relief and a little bit of freedom to let her rip. And so we would account for that in the next workout. First of all, I think there'll be some natural compensation for that because my psyche will integrate this workout in the sense that I've done it and I have a little more confidence that I can do 6 reps like this and not explode in smithereens and have my lungs fall out of my chest cavity or whatever, or my legs fall off. So that's good. But also, if we've changed the order of the shoes and I finish with a Bont, then if I do have that effect in the next rep, maybe that'll account for that, right? I mean, I really wasn't sure what to expect in terms of data or output on this test, and I really tried to not go into it with preconceived notions. I've been riding these Bont shoes for a while and they feel quite good to me. I really like the way the top cuff captures energy, in particular initiation of the power phase early when the crank is vertical and the crank is here and I'm driving over the front of the pedal stroke. To me, that's super effective, right? With these shoes, and no other shoe really captures that energy here. And to be clear, sometimes people are confused on how this works, but this, hopefully my screen's not crap right now. No, I think it's okay. You just got to clean your lens, like YouTube 101, right? As if I know. So no other shoe really has this type of capture, but some people are under the impression that the shoe will prevent dorsiflexion of the foot. So dorsiflexion would be this motion, right? Kicking your toes up like the dorsal fin of a shark. And they think that this cuff is going to prevent that, but that's actually not the case. This cuff has a very thick pad here and also a very rigid support and pad here. And so what it does is it captures the energy of your foot. I'm going to show you here. We're going to go camera and maneuver. And it captures here and here, so that you have freedom to dorsiflex there, but you drive over the front right across here on either side of this medial malleolus and lateral malleolus, right? But there's freedom for this tibialis anterior tendon to move and to flex. Mine's really prominent. I don't even know if you can really see it too well with this white sock on, but mine's very prominent here. So certain types of shoes that don't have a wrap, like this style of Bont has what we would call a wrap, meaning the tongue wraps over the top like this. An old school shoe that has like a centralized tongue and 2 kind of gaps on either side when we ran the boa over the center of the foot in the centralized tongue shoe design, that didn't work well for me because that boa put too much pressure on my anterior tibialis tendon. So these are the types of things you figure out when you wear shoes a lot and you race your bike a lot. And we want to capture the force produced at the foot without interfering with the ability of the muscles and tendons, ligaments, fascia, bones to move in the proper order. We want to organize the bones, we might say, but not restrict movement. And that's tricky because that requires knowledge of exactly where we want to capture movement and where we want to allow movement, right? And that's where I think the shoe shines. So that was interesting. I hope you found that little journey worthwhile. And if you have comments about my little pseudoscience basement bro science experiment, hit me. Maybe you've got some ideas on how to analyze this data more effectively. Blah, blah, blah. We could look at W prime depletion, maybe. I'm not 100% convinced that WKO is the best way to do that. Maybe I'll put this file into Stride and take a look there. They've got some interesting metrics on bullets and such. But if you have ideas on how you would want to see this data analyzed more precisely than what I've done, then hit me. Maybe there's some other stuff to do with it. I don't know that looking at depletion of W prime or whatever other metric you want to call it, anaerobic bullets, is going to give us that much more information than what we're teasing out in simply the averages from set to set. But maybe. Yeah, that's what we say. Also, if you have suggestions on a future protocol that might tease things out more effectively, hit me back. Originally, Laura came to me and they asked me to do this test indoors on a smart trainer. And I was like, yo, I don't really ride trainers. I don't own a smart trainer. I own a Wahoo kicker roller that I use for fitting. But I don't really want to do intervals inside. I used up all my indoor points when I was trying to be a pro track racer. I guess I was a pro track racer. I technically got paid for it. And so that was a thing. But I don't train indoors anymore, really. Unless I'm doing roller videos for you guys, which is just fun and me talking and teaching. But otherwise, no thanks. I'll ski well, not this winter apparently, because there's no skiing in Colorado because we don't have any snow. So this is a good winter to not have to ride indoors because it's been like 58 degrees every day, which is a little terrifying. So it's like that old shirt says pray for snow, except now it's like pray for snow so that you have water in the summer. Yeah. The East Coast took all our snow this year, but that's cool. We'll get some at some point. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like I said, if you have suggestions on protocol for future shoe testing, hit me back. I can't promise that I'll do it, but I will listen to your suggestions. Okay. I came to the realization that I started every single video in this episode with okay. I don't know why I do that. Why is everything okay? What is the origin of the term okay? Let's say this. Postscript. Welcome back. Last video. I was in the sauna and then I was thinking more about the data and thinking about ways we could maybe dig into it a little more and see if there were more insights we could gain. So I chopped up these files in Training Peaks a little more. And what I did is I looked at each individual segment. So here's our Lore 1 segment. That is not to be confused with the Lore 1 shoe, but that is to indicate the first Lore test or first Lore run besides the warm-up. And that was 53 seconds, average 484. What I did is I just chopped up the first 25 seconds. Let's see if those will appear. Nope. Training Peaks does this thing. It does this thing where when you open a file and you start selecting segments, that it loses the cursor and you have to close everything and open everything and then re-go and find your stuff again. And if any of you Training Peaks or people are watching, this one's a bit clunky because it loses your workflow, loses the concentration. And anytime technology gets in the way of me concentrating on what I'm trying to figure out or teach, it's a barrier to productivity or growth. Cool. So now I got to find this interval again, and then I got to slide the slider, because who the hell wants all that smoothing? Give me granularity or give me death. Just like Jello Biafra. And here's the first 25 seconds. This is my estimate of when I sat down. It's about 25 seconds to my neighbor's driveway. And that probably is somewhere, it could be that I sat down about here or here, a couple seconds off. But what I did is I just took 25 seconds from somewhere in here, this steep incline. I could have taken it from there, I suppose. But how I did it on all these files is I took 25 seconds from about there. And it's not perfect, but it's close enough. This is 24.94 seconds. And then I looked at the last 10 to 12 seconds, the finish, where I stood up again. So you can kind of see in the middle here, this is where I was seated, right? And I figured since I was standing up for that part, and I was standing up for that part, and I was probably hanging on for dear life there, maybe I could see something in the data. Maybe not. Just because we can measure something doesn't mean it tells us anything useful. So in the lore sequence of data, let's go through lore first. First 25 seconds, we have 546. Then here we have 537. We'd call that a tie, because that's also probably within the range of error of any power meter. And then lore 3 here, first 25 seconds, we go from 537 to 546. So that's interesting. The first and third lore runs had the same power exactly for the first 25 seconds. Here it is again. Let's confirm that. Yep. A little bit different maximums, but the same. Okay. And largely we would say that here it did it again. That first 25 seconds stayed the same. We don't care about the visual, actually. We can just look at the numbers. Visuals are stupid. Now let's go through the Bonts. So here's our first run for Bont. And if we go 25 seconds there, we get 526. So it's about 20 watts less, 15 watts less, depending on which one we're looking at. And for the second Bont 25 second start, we get 530. So that's about constant within the Bont realm. And then for the third one, we got, oh, whoops, wrong one. 547. So that goes up a little bit. That actually matches the lore. Excuse me. But as we saw, the Bont run 3 was the lowest average of all the runs, but it had about the same first 25 seconds. So that's interesting. That tells us that, one, it was the last run of the day. So I was probably fatigued. I was fatiguing it throughout all those sets. But in this one in particular, it really took a nosedive. And if we look at the last 12 seconds, let's go through the last 12 seconds of the lores to compare first, and then we'll go through the Bonts again. Or 10 seconds. I did 10 on this one. 470. This isn't a perfect comparison. Versus lore 494. That one was quite good. And I did stand for all of these. Lore 3, last 487. Also quite good. Okay, now let's go through Bont. Bont run 1, 455. There, that really fell apart. Bont run 2, 492. That one was better. And then Bont run 3, last 12 seconds, 432. Like basically in pieces. And if I can get this to show us the last run, we'll go again. Let's look at the last Bont run again. See, I just want to show you the data trend on this because I was poking around in here after dinner, and we'll get rid of that smoothing because it's useless reptile. I mean, really, this is the only run without a U-shaped curve, right? So that's instructive. I just realized something. When I was talking to you guys earlier, for some reason I was thinking that the last lore run was the final run, but it wasn't, in fact. It was this run. And this curve I would describe as a, what is this? This is an L, like a high front and then a flat bottom, roughly. It's not a U because it doesn't curve up on the other side like all the other ones do. It doesn't lift in the last 10 seconds where I stand up. Basically, I had nothing here. So this was the last run of the day and the lowest overall power. And it could be that I was just blown. Like, I didn't feel, all of them felt hard, and I didn't feel like I was shattered on this one relative to the other ones. It was hard, but it wasn't like, holy crap, my legs fell off. So I suppose if I'd been looking at the data live more carefully, I might have been curious to do another lore just to see then, because then if we saw the data fall off on the lore too, we would know that was fatigue. But the way it points now, it kind of looks like as I fatigue, the bond is less productive. And I would say that subjectively, the differences in the shoes are that the lore feels like it helps capture power in more parts of the pedal stroke. It captures power across a broader range of degrees, both in the saddle and out of the saddle. So it feels like I can connect with the pedal with less effort. That'd be the way I'd describe it. And it seems like the data supports this trend, although, again, this is bro science, basement science, N of 1, and a really small data pool. And we've got 6 minutes worth of work here. So we have to be careful about interpreting this kind of data. Data. Without bricks, I cannot make clay. One other thing I wanted to show you, if I can get my computer to work properly. Here's my WKO, and this is for those of you who aren't familiar with this graph, here on the right we have our time frame, right? And we can select different durations, and you can see how many power files I have. Look at that. I've got all these power files, although I'm missing some years quite a bit. I'm missing 2000, 2001, and 2002. Those like went away on some hard drive that died. Same with 98. I don't know where my 98 power files are. They're gone forever. This kind of sucks, actually. So all in on WKO, I have 6,325 files. That's a lot of data. And year to date, we have this many. And that's weird because there's a different number for year to date and 2026, but those should be the same thing. I don't actually understand that. Anyway, so we can filter over here and look at these two curves, right? So this is a mean max power curve. And right now it's sorted to the last 1,095 days, which if I'm not mistaken is 3 years. And we have two lines. This line here is the best I've done across all 1,095 days in maximal efforts. So we can filter across the bottom down here. This is much more granular than Trini Peaks. And this is one of the better features of WKO. We can see there's a few hiccups in this power curve. And generally speaking, the lumpier it is, the less, that tells us that there's some errant data or that some artifacts, or maybe that I just tried really hard for a certain duration. Like there, for some reason. I must have done some 18-minute effort. And then here I did another really hard 6.5-minute effort. I don't know what that would be. Maybe a local climb. Anyway, so this top curve represents the best of the best for me. That is the maximum smack that I've got. And then this curve represents the maximum smack I did in the last 7 days. And so what we can look and see is where did it come close? And it came pretty close right here, right around the minute duration. That was today's effort. So around 55 seconds. You can see I was about, 30 watts off. Something like that, 25, 30 watts at 55 seconds. And then at 57 seconds, more like 20 watts off. And then here at 50 seconds, I was, more like 50 watts off, quite a bit. So that's fine. That's the last 1,095 days. But now if I filter to 365 days, now we get this red band. And this red band represents where the bottom curve usurped the top curve. And note I specifically use the word usurped There's another word that begins with T you could use, but I don't use that word anymore. We're not allowed to use that word. So from 47 seconds up to 1 minute and 6 seconds, I made the best power that I have in the last 365 days. Now, again, these numbers might be like, you suck, for those of you who are really fast. And they might be like, oh my God, you're blowing my mind, for those of you who aren't as fast as me. And that's how cycling works. There are lots of people who are way faster than me and lots of people that are not as fast as me. You're welcome. And the reason I'm showing you this is because I wanted you to see that I went hard in this effort. I wasn't holding back. And that's relevant because I think that part of what we're teasing out here is in maximal efforts. What is the result? If we lay the smack down, what do we accomplish? And we can even ask the question, well, in which effort did we do this? And so here I went 491 watts in 55 seconds. And I'm pretty sure that has to be the last lower effort here. Yeah, that's that one. So in the lore shoes, I made my best 55-second power that I made in the last year today. That's pretty cool. This is a neat graph. The danger of this graph is that it encourages you to play whack-a-mole, where you're like, oh, well, looky what we have here. For 2 minutes and 12 seconds, I only did 360 watts, which actually is kind of pathetic. I don't do a lot of really hard, short, maximal efforts anymore. It's just not a thing that I do very often. But anyway, I could probably go out and ride for 2 minutes and 20 seconds and just watch my average power and keep it over 360. And even if I only hit 365, I would get to see another red band and I would be like a rock star. That's whack-a-mole. It's a fun game to play now and again, but it's not really training. It's whack-a-mole. It's gamification. And we don't want to confuse gamification with training, because the purpose of training is to provide a certain physiological response to your system. The purpose of gamification is to win games. So if you like gamification, you should go play Centipede. And if you like training, you should be an athlete. The other thing that's interesting about this graph is, notice that here I still set my best power all the way up to 1 minute and 6 seconds, even though my longest effort today was like 57 seconds or something. So I could have kept going over the top of the climb and still made this block longer, but I didn't because I had such a gap here. Anyway, so by 40 watts there, you can see at that moment. So that's pretty cool. It's always good to do that kind of stuff. And whenever you're north of 50 and you set any kind of PR for the last year, or the last, like, if you set a last 1,095 days or an all-time, like every file, like all workouts, then you are freaking psyched. You're having champagne and doing cartwheels. You can see I'm not even close. So some people would be bummed out by that graph, but I'm not. I don't care. I still enjoy cycling, and it doesn't bother me at all that this stuff's off. Although some of this is not probably accurate. Yep. So that's not correct, actually. This graph is inflated. There's a power file in here that doesn't belong to me, because I never made 453 watts for 5 minutes. Of that, I am quite sure. So this is wrong. Although this part, that's correct. And that's correct. Anyway, I digress. One last thing. Maybe this is useful. Here, whoops, that didn't work. Wait, come back. Let's see if we can get that to work. I have too many windows open. Hold on, let's do this. Let's just drag this single window over and see if that'll work. There we go. Okay, that's better. And we're gonna make my face smaller. Yay. Okay, so here's some data in Stride. And in particular, I don't think I can make this graph bigger, this part. I'm just learning my way around Stride. I'm just playing with it right now. It's a free count. They're pretty cool. And what this is W prime balance. And so this little graph shows how your W prime takes a nosedive after every effort. And this is the long one where I had to go around the block an extra time because there's a bigger gap there, here, because school was being picked up on the street where I was changing shoes, and so I had to give some extra recovery there. But and for those of you who are wondering about the recovery interval being not equal, well, if that really impacted things, this would have been my best effort here, and it wasn't. My best one was here. So that's interesting. But this was the warm-up lower effort, and you can see on the right over there, my W prime balance is 0.3 kJs. That means I almost emptied the tank, right? Means I had almost no anaerobic bullets left. So in theory, if this math is correct, now remember this is modeled. If this model is correct, that means that there is 0.64, 0.34. That means that when you hit 0, you can't really accelerate anymore or even do one lick of work above threshold. You're stuck at threshold. You can still go hard, but you're kind of pinned at threshold for a while. And slowly those KJs will reform. If you stay at threshold, they will reform. But an example of this would be in a race situation when someone's like 15 meters ahead of you and you just can't close the gap. All you can do is ride right behind them, but you can't go and weld the gap shut. And we've all been in that situation at one time or another. Sometimes it just happens. So I was just barely above that point. Like I maybe could have accelerated a tiny bit. After the second effort, I was in the box. That's negative. So in theory, that means that I completely depleted my W prime, right? If I'm reading this graph correctly, which I think I am. And on this one, so that was lower Bont. That was my first Bont effort. My first Bont effort, I just wasn't able to dig as deep. Like I definitely tried, but I wasn't able to dig as deep. Now, that's probably the longer recovery interval that did that, because here I was green going into it, whereas on these other ones, I was just this one I barely touched green, right? My average is 8.95 according to this, and right there, I got to 8.52. Right there. I got to 9.21. That's the green part. Must be the green part. I just barely got into green. You can barely see a little green right there. Sorry, I can't make this part any bigger. At least I don't know how to. Like I said, I'm just learning this. I'm just learning stride. So that was, for sure, that was the recovery. They did that there. They kept me in the green, from going as deep into the red, right? And then there I got into a little bit of a green, and then boom, that was lower, the second lower. And I was just pretty much 0, minus 0.07. And then here I completely smacked myself. That would have been the last. Wait, sorry. Lower, Bont, lower, Bont. There. That Bont, I was able to go quite deep. So there for sure I was negative balance. That means I would have had to ride at threshold or maybe even a little bit below threshold for a few minutes to recover my KJs if I were in a race situation and I had to maintain pace. And then on the last one here, again, I was able to really tank it. Yeah. So there I didn't quite get to baseline, 8.1, and here I got to 8.65. Again, not quite to baseline. So that's interesting because, I was riding around and I just kind of went up the block really easy and went back and was like, okay, I can do another one. And on all of those moments, I had just basically gotten to baseline, right? Right there. Right there. I was like, okay, I can do another effort. Right there. Right there. Baseline, just above baseline. There I was for sure recovered. Here, even after this first one, I was like, oh, I can do another one. I don't know how long I'll be able to recover, but yeah, I'm ready. And I did it. So I think it's interesting to see put a value to those numbers, assuming the model's correct. But also, when I talk about people using instinct to figure out when they're recovered, this is a mathematical example of that in action. So anyway, those are just the ways I look at the data. If y'all have some cool ideas on other ways to splice things up or figure things out, hit me back. Otherwise, I might do another one of these next week. Apparently, it's going to be 65 degrees in Colorado for the rest of the year. And we live in San Diego now. We have winter, San Diego winter. So I'll probably be able to ride it again next week and do more tests. So maybe I'll give it another crack and flip the order around and maybe do 1 rep extra or something. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. No promises. Thanks for watching.